Hey guys, tonight we step into muddy lanes and chill morning air. Right in the heart of a medieval village where the smell of smoke and damp hay clings to everything. You're lying on your straw mattress, one itchy wool blanket barely keeping out the draft that sneaks through the timber cracks. It's Sunday, the one day meant for rest and holiness, but rest isn't exactly on the menu. The church bells are tolling like an impatient alarm clock, and if you're late to Mass, you'll have more than muddy feet to worry about. The priest might glare, and your neighbors will whisper about how your soul's clearly halfway to hell. You probably won't survive this well, not spiritually, anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and the time where you are. I love seeing where everyone's listening from, like a little map of sleepy time travelers. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The morning bells keep echoing, hollow and distant, as you sit up, bones creaking. The smell of last night's ashes tickles your nose, and there's a faint trace of stew lingering in the air, mostly cabbage. Maybe a hint of onion if you were lucky. You blink into the gray light slipping through the shutter cracks, and already you can hear the shuffle of your family stirring. Sundays might be holy, but that doesn't mean you get to laze around. There are animals to check, fires to coax back to life, and little ones who need to be scrubbed before you face God. You pull on your rough linen shirt, scratchy wool hose, and tug your cloak around your shoulders. The fabric smells like smoke and sweat, because laundry isn't a daily event, it's more like a seasonal miracle. Still, it's Sunday, so you at least try to look alive. Your mother or your wife, depending on your station, tosses you a quick glance that says, "Don't forget the kids' faces this time." You dunk a rag into a wooden basin, the water biting cold against your fingers, and dab it over your cheeks. There's no soap, just cold water and prayer. Clean enough. Out in the lane, the mud is half frozen, clinging to your boots as you trudge toward the church bell's steady clang. Every toll feels like a countdown. Across the fields, smoke rises from low cottages, curling lazily into the gray sky. A few neighbors are already outside, women tying cloaks, men adjusting hoods. Children running barefoot even in the chill, because that's just what children do when you've got no shoes that fit. It's not just the bells calling people, it's the rhythm of life itself. In medieval Europe, the church controls the calendar like a divine timekeeper. Sunday isn't a day off. It's God's day. And skipping Mass is like missing your boss's biggest meeting of the year. Except the boss in question decides your eternal fate. Still, there's a small comfort in the routine. You know every sound, the bleating of sheep, the squelch of mud, the chatter of your neighbor arguing about whose turn it is to mend the fence. There's even the familiar bark of the Reeves dog, reminding everyone that order must be kept even before church. You pass by a thatched cottage where a woman is hurriedly combing her daughter's hair with a bone comb. "You'll not go before the Virgin with that nest on your head," she scolds, tugging the girl's braids tight. A small crowd gathers, everyone shuffling along the same narrow path toward the stone tower rising in the distance, the only building that dares to pierce the sky. Inside your stomach, hunger gnaws quietly. You probably had a crust of bread and maybe a sip of ale at dawn, but Sunday's breakfast is never a feast. The real meal waits until after Mass. Still, you trudge on because hunger is temporary, and hellfire, well, that's apparently forever. It's funny modern people talk about the weekend, but in your world, Saturday isn't freedom, and Sunday isn't leisure. It's obligation. 6 days of labor followed by one long ceremony where your soul gets scrubbed, whether you like it or not. Historians still argue whether peasants truly enjoyed Sundays or merely endured them, but for you, it's a blend of both. The day carries both relief and pressure. Relief from the plow, pressure from the priest. As the sun struggles up, you spot the church, squat, gray, and ancient-looking, even though it's barely a century old. The bell keeps swinging, and smoke curls from the chimney near the rectory. You can almost hear the priest's voice warming up, rehearsing Latin words you'll never understand. Here's a mainstream fact. Medieval peasants genuinely looked forward to church. Not always for prayer, but because it was the one chance to meet everyone at once. News, gossip, and sometimes romance all bloomed beneath the shadow of the steeple. Church wasn't just a holy place, it was the medieval version of social media. And here's a quirky tidbit. Many villages had unofficial bell sleepers, older folks who lived close enough to the church that they'd wake when the bells rang, then fall right back asleep halfway through the first psalm. No one dared wake them, assuming God would handle it eventually. You reach the churchyard, boots caked with mud, and pause by the lich gate. The priest's voice is already booming from inside, echoing through the heavy door. Children whisper, mothers hush them, and someone coughs hard enough to start a chain reaction across the crowd. You slip into the dim interior, where incense smoke dances like ghostly ribbons in candlelight. You can almost taste the blend of wax and musty stone. The air feels thick, sacred, and slightly claustrophobic. The nave is packed people shoulder to shoulder. The rich up front, you somewhere behind a family of 10 with a baby that's already crying. The Latin chants begin, long and droning. And though you don't understand a word, the rhythm seeps into your bones like a lullaby. Your knees ache from kneeling on cold stone. You look up at the faded fresco of Christ above the altar, chipped and peeling, yet still majestic. A pigeon coos somewhere in the rafters, its timing impeccable, right during a solemn prayer. You stifle a laugh and glance around to see if anyone else noticed. A few smirks flash. Even piety has its limits. And then the thought hits you: this might be the only time in the week where everyone stands together. The Lord's steward, the blacksmith, the widow, the shepherd boy. All equal under God, at least until Mass ends. The illusion of equality lasts exactly one sermon, and that's something. A baby cries again. The priest glares, mutters something about noise offending the angels, and carries on. You try to focus, but hunger and boredom wrestle for your attention. You think about the stew you'll have later, the ale waiting at the tavern. Maybe even a chance to talk to that flax-haired girl from 2 cottages down. Holy thoughts, of course. Mostly, as the sermon stretches on, your eyes droop. You catch yourself nodding and jerk awake. The priest's voice rises sharply, like he noticed. Probably not, but you sit straighter just in case. When the final hymn echoes off the stone walls, relief sweeps the crowd like a breeze. You cross yourself, murmur an amen, and file out into the sunlight. The air feels fresher now, as if even God believes you've earned it. Somewhere behind you, the bells begin again. This time, not calling, but celebrating. The rest of Sunday awaits food, laughter, maybe a few harmless sins before the week restarts. But for now, you just breathe, stretch your sore legs, and feel the mud between your boots again. Because no matter how devout you try to be, you're still a peasant. And the truth is, holiness always feels better after breakfast. You step out of the dim church, your eyes squinting as sunlight bounces off damp stone and puddles. The service might be over, but the day's just warming up. Sunday morning still smells of wet earth, wood smoke, and baked rye. Before you can think of food, there's the little matter of getting properly washed, or at least pretending you did. Back in your cottage, the family scurries like ants around a dropped crumb. Someone's reheating the leftover pottage from last night, someone else is hauling water from the well, and you're just trying not to trip over a toddler crawling underfoot. Hygiene in the medieval village is more of an optimistic concept than a habit, but Sunday calls for a little extra effort. You pull up your sleeves and face the wooden tub, half filled with water, so cold it makes your fingers ache. A thin film of ice might even skim the top if it's winter. You splash your face and neck, wincing at the sting, and run your fingers through your hair, which feels like it's been oiled with sheep fat. It has. Actually, tallow makes a decent substitute for soap when you've got nothing else. For most peasants, soap is a luxury item, something the monastery might produce or traders sell at fairs for more than a chicken's worth. Instead, you rely on herbs, rosemary if you're lucky, or nettles if you're not, to mask the scent of a week's honest work. Still, the act of washing before Mass or before your Sunday meal isn't just about vanity. It's a spiritual ritual. Clean body, clean soul, so the priest says. Your tunic for the day hangs by the hearth, the good one. It's patched, faded, and smells faintly of smoke, but compared to your work clothes, it's practically royal. You shake off the dust, smooth the fabric, and slip it over your head. The coarse wool scratches your skin, but it's comforting in its own way, like the village itself, rough but familiar. Your wife ties a leather cord around her waist, smoothing down her kirtle. She hums under her breath a hymn. She half remembers and fusses with her hair until it's mostly tamed beneath a linen veil. Her hands are red from the cold, but her smile softens the lines on her face. God likes clean faces, she says, dabbing your cheek with the corner of her sleeve. You grin back, trying not to flinch when she rubs a stubborn patch of dirt away. Children tumble around, giggling as they take turns splashing each other from the basin. One slips, lands on his backside, and starts wailing. You scoop him up, chuckling softly. There, you're baptized in dirt already, you tease, setting him upright. As you get ready, your stomach reminds you it's been mostly running on air since dawn. Breakfast is a thin slice of barley bread dipped in ale, maybe with a drizzle of honey if the bees were kind that season. Some families save their best ingredients for Sundays: a handful of dried peas, a pinch of imported salt, even a scrap of smoked fish if fortune smiles. But more often than not, it's whatever's left in the pot from the week. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually cared much about cleanliness, or if that's just a myth painted by later centuries. Some records describe villagers bathing in streams during summer, while others suggest that washing too often was seen as vain or even unhealthy. The truth probably lies somewhere between a mix of necessity, superstition, and whatever weather the Lord sent that week. Here's a mainstream fact. The medieval church encouraged bathing before holy days, though not everyone followed through. Monks and nuns had strict schedules for washing hands, feet, and faces. Peasants, not so much. Still, on Sundays, many made the effort, if only to avoid standing out in a smelly crowd during Mass. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some places, people believed that washing your entire body on a Sunday might invite bad luck or even illness because it showed disrespect to God's rest. So they compromised: clean face, clean hands, and pray that your neighbors didn't stand too close. You run a comb through your hair, wooden hand-carved, a little uneven, and try to tame the wild mess on your head. The comb snags on a knot, and you curse under your breath. Your wife smirks. Maybe if you prayed as much as you swear, your hair would behave. You grin. I'd rather sin with dignity. When you finally step outside again, the village feels alive. Smoke curls lazily from every chimney, and the smell of baking bread drifts through the air like a promise. The sun's higher now, brushing the thatched roofs with gold. You wave to your neighbor, a man with half his beard gone from a cooking accident, who nods back proudly as though uneven whiskers are the latest fashion. Children chase a chicken through the lane, their laughter echoing between mud walls. Dogs bark, wagging their tails, and somewhere a cockerel crows late, like he overslept after a rough night. The simple joy of a Sunday morning hums through the air. It's the only day the village doesn't sound like a blacksmith's workshop. For a moment, you stand there, watching. The whole scene feels oddly peaceful, even beautiful. You think about how every week follows this same rhythm: toil, toil, toil. Then this one fragile pause. You can almost trick yourself into believing that life isn't just plowing and paying tithes. That maybe, just maybe, there's something sacred in the routine. You head toward the well to fetch another bucket of water. The stone rim is slick with moss, and as you lean over, you see your reflection ripple in the dark water. The face staring back at you looks older than it should, sunburned, lined, but still alive. You dip the bucket, haul it up with a grunt, and splash a bit over your arms for good measure. Cold enough to make you hiss. Behind you, the blacksmith's wife laughs, watching her husband scrub his face with a rag that looks like it's seen better centuries. If God wanted you clean, he'd make rain fall indoors, she jokes. He tosses a handful of water her way, and she shrieks, half laughing, half scolding. That's the thing about Sundays, they soften everyone. The reeve isn't barking orders, the Lord's steward isn't demanding rent, and even the priest seems almost human after a hearty sermon. For one day, laughter replaces the clatter of tools. And mud becomes something you notice rather than something you work in. Still, the church's rules are never far from mind. Somewhere in the distance, another bell tolls a smaller one, calling the devout to midday prayer. You bow your head briefly, more out of habit than piety. Religion shapes every breath, every step, every bite you take. You might grumble, you might joke, but deep down, you know the rhythm of faith holds this fragile world together. You dry your hands on your tunic and look toward the village square, where the tavern stands shuttered until after Mass. Later, that'll be the place of laughter, gossip, and maybe one or two slightly scandalous dances. But for now, the morning belongs to quiet preparation. You glance back at your cottage smoke curling from the chimney, chickens pecking near the door. The faint sound of your wife singing while she tidies up. You realize that, for all the hardship, there's comfort here, a rhythm, a purpose. You're part of something larger, a living, breathing pattern of faith and mud. Of sin and forgiveness, repeated 1,000 Sundays over centuries. And as you pull your cloak tighter and prepare to head out again, you can't help but smile. For all its dirt and toil. There's something pure about a world where getting ready for Sunday means washing your hands, combing your hair, and believing just for one morning that holiness might smell faintly of smoke and rye bread. You shoulder your cloak, feel the damp wool cling to your arms, and step out into the lane. The morning's half spent already, and the bells begin their second round of calling slow, solemn, echoing across the fields like a heartbeat you can't ignore. It's time for the long walk to church. Not that it's far, maybe half a mile, but when the road's nothing but mud, it's puddles and a faint smell of manure, it feels like a pilgrimage through purgatory. You trudge along with your family, boots squelching. Your youngest clings to your hand, trying to keep up as her little shoes sink with every step. Around you, the whole village is on the move, a procession of cloaks and caps and baskets. Old men lean on sticks, mothers carry sleepy infants, a few dogs trot at the edges, tails wagging like they're part of the holy company. The sound of chatter drifts through the mist. Someone's arguing about sheep again, someone else muttering about how long the priest's sermon was last week. Nearly missed my dinner, grumbles one man. His wife elbows him sharply. Better to miss your dinner than your soul, she hisses. He rolls his eyes. You hide a grin. Marriage, as it turns out, hasn't changed much in 700 years. You catch a whiff of something sweet as you pass a neighbor's cottage, maybe a bit of honey warming over the hearth, or the rare scent of baking cakes for the Lord's table. Your stomach grumbles in protest. Sunday mornings are supposed to be holy, but all you can think about is food. The fields stretch out to your left, rows of stubble and frost, brown and gray under the pale sky. Crows pick at something in the furrows. You can almost feel the land resting, same as you. The plows tucked away, the oxen munch quietly in their pens, and for one blessed day, no one's breaking their back against the earth. A boy runs ahead, kicking a clump of mud like it's a football, and nearly splatters a passing reeve. The reeve scowls, muttering something about discipline, but doesn't chase him. Even the local enforcers seem lazier on Sundays. Walking together like this, you realize how much the road tells the story of your whole village. The deep ruts show where carts have passed, the broken stones where last winter's flood tore through. You know every bend, every puddle, every twisted oak that leans toward the track as if listening in on the latest gossip. And gossip there is plenty of it. The blacksmith's apprentice apparently got caught kissing the miller's daughter behind the bakehouse. Someone claims they saw a fox near the hen coops last night, though another swears it was the devil himself. You nod along, half listening, half laughing. Rumors are as much a part of Sunday as the sermon. Historians still argue whether peasants truly saw church-going as an obligation or a chance to socialize. Some believe villagers dreaded the priest's judgment. Others think it was the highlight of their week at time to see friends, trade whispers, even flirt under the pretense of piety. The truth is probably both. You walk the line between salvation and small talk every step of the way. Here's a mainstream fact. The walk to church was often a communal ritual in itself. In many villages, attendance wasn't optional. Lords expected their tenants to show up, not just for worship, but to hear announcements, resolve disputes, or learn new decrees. Skipping Mass could cost you a fine or worse, a public scolding at the next manorial court. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some peasants made tiny wooden shoes just for the walk, so they could take them off before entering church and appear miraculously clean-footed. A bit of holy deception never hurt anyone, right? You reach the edge of the village where the path turns upward. The church tower looms ahead now, squat and gray, rising from a little hill like it's been there forever. The bell keeps tolling, the sound bouncing off the fields. Beneath it, the graveyard spreads out in crooked lines of mossy stones. You pause a moment. Everyone doesn't glance toward the mounds. They remind you why you're walking this path at all. In a world where illness lurks behind every cold and childbirth is a gamble. Faith feels like the only thing standing between you and oblivion. A flock of sparrows bursts from the hedges, scattering across the sky. The air smells faintly of damp leaves and wood ash. You pull your cloak tighter, the fabric heavy on your shoulders, and trudge on. The lane narrows between two old walls, stones slick with moss. Kids dart ahead, laughing, their voices echoing. For them, this is an adventure, an excuse to run free before being told to sit still for an hour of Latin they won't understand. As you walk, you pass the village pond, half covered in reeds. A goose hisses at you protectively from the water's edge, and you hiss back. There's a soft chuckle from behind a friend, maybe, or your brother-in-law, shaking his head. Careful, he says. Pick a fight with that one and you'll lose. You grin. Wouldn't be my first loss this week. The group grows as the path winds on. More villagers join from side lanes, women with baskets of bread as offerings. Men carrying wooden staves, not for war, but for walking through the muck. Even the old widow, who rarely leaves her hearth, shuffles along with the help of two neighbors. Everyone belongs here, no matter how poor, tired, or cynical. At one point, the road passes the Lord's manor. Rises above the fields like a smug grin of stone and timber. You and everyone else instinctively lower your eyes. The Lord might not bother coming to Mass with the peasants, but his presence hovers all the same high as fields. His taxes, his rules. Even your Sunday walk happens on land that technically isn't yours. You wonder, briefly, what it would feel like to walk freely, to wander beyond the hills without fear of permission or punishment. The thought feels dangerous, like touching fire, so you let it go. Someone starts humming a hymn, a slow, familiar tune about redemption and rain. The melody passes through the crowd, and soon others join. The sound drifts through the crisp air, mingling with the bells. There's something beautiful about it, even if your voice cracks halfway through. For a moment, the mud, the hunger, the cold, all of it fades, replaced by the shared rhythm of voices rising towards something bigger than the village. You crest the hill, and the church stands before you at last. The stone walls are damp and streaked with lichen, the wooden door darkened by centuries of hands. A carved figure of St. Peter watches over the entrance, his stone eyes kind but stern, as if to say, "I've seen every excuse before. Don't try me." The crowd slows as everyone files toward the door. The men remove their caps, the women bow their heads. You follow, the air thick with incense, already seeping from the open doorway. You can hear faint singing from inside, probably the cantor warming up. A shaft of light breaks through the clouds, striking the church's tower like a halo. You almost laugh at the cliché, but it's oddly perfect. You glance back once more at the village below. The cottages look small, almost toy-like from here, smoke rising from each like the breath of a sleeping beast. For one fleeting moment, you feel proud part of something ancient, enduring, larger than yourself. Then someone elbows you gently. "Move along," they whisper. "God's waiting." So you step forward, boots heavy with mud, heart oddly light. The church door creaks open, swallowing you into a world of candlelight, incense, and Latin chants that will carry you through the next hour, and maybe, if you're lucky, through the next week. The moment you step through the doorway, the air changes cooler, heavier, sweet with incense and beeswax. The flicker of dozens of candles catches in the polished brass of the altar. And for a heartbeat, you just stand there blinking, letting your eyes adjust after the gray light outside. The door closes behind you with a soft thud, muffling the wind and the chatter of the latecomers. The only sounds now are the shuffling of feet on stone and the low, steady hum of voices that don't quite form words. You make your way toward the back, joining the sea of wool cloaks and bowed heads. The smell of damp earth clings to everyone. A child sneezes. Someone coughs into their sleeve. You can't tell whether it's reverence or exhaustion that keeps people quiet. But the silence feels sacred, like the inside of a held breath. Above you, the roof beams stretch like the ribs of a giant beast. From the rafters hangs a wooden crucifix, darkened by centuries of candle smoke. You catch a glimmer of gold paint still visible on Christ's halo, just enough to remind you that beauty once touched this place before smoke and time dulled it. A priest moves across the altar, his robes whispering. You watch the flash of embroidered thread, a rare luxury of scarlet and gold. The color looks almost out of place among so much gray stone and patched wool. But maybe that's the point. A reminder of heaven against the mud of the world. You kneel, knees meeting cold flagstone. The sensation jolts up your legs. You fold your hands, bow your head, and try to look pious. A dozen prayers drift through your mind, half-remembered words from childhood, fragments of songs your grandmother used to hum. Somewhere nearby, someone mutters the wrong line and gets hushed by their wife. Mass begins. The priest's voice rises in Latin, a language as mysterious to you as the stars. Dominus vobiscum. He intones, and the congregation murmurs something that sounds roughly like agreement. You don't understand, but you know when to kneel, when to stand, when to cross yourself. It's muscle memory now, as familiar as plowing or mending. There's a rhythm to the service. Chant, prayer, silence, kneel, rise, repeat. The incense thickens until it curls through the beams like ghostly smoke. Sunlight slants through a high window, painting dust motes gold. The scene is almost beautiful, almost, because your stomach keeps reminding you it's still empty. You sneak a glance around. The Lord Steward sits up front on a wooden bench, his hat resting beside him, posture as stiff as his sense of importance. The village reeve is nearby, trying not to fall asleep. A handful of children fidget near their parents' skirts, whispering about the shapes in the stained glass. One of them points at a painted saint holding a sword and whispers, "That's St. George. He killed a dragon." You smile. For them, the miracle is real. Historians still argue whether peasants truly found spiritual comfort in these services or simply endured them out of fear. Some say the ritual offered real solace, a rhythm of certainty in an uncertain world. Others claim it was little more than social obligation, a performance of piety to keep the priest and the Lord content. The truth likely depends on the person. For you, it's both, part faith, part habit, part self-preservation. Here's a mainstream fact. Most medieval churches weren't silent, solemn places the way we imagine them today. People whispered, coughed, moved around. Dogs wandered in sometimes. Babies cried. A mass might feel more like a busy marketplace with candles than the serene hush of modern cathedrals. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some peasants, too tired from the week's work, actually used the long sermon as a chance to napping against pillars, or even lying flat on the floor if the priest's back was turned. Falling asleep in church wasn't uncommon. What mattered was showing up. Presence over consciousness, as it were. The priest's voice drones on, rich and echoing. He raises the chalice, turns toward the altar, and murmurs the consecration. You bow your head automatically. The bells ring once, twice, thrice. You smell the faint sourness of wine mixed with incense and wonder, not for the first time, what it tastes like. You'll never know. Only the priest drinks it. You get crumbs of bread, if you're lucky. Behind you, a baby lets out a shriek. The priest pauses mid-blessing, his eyes narrowing. The mother blushes crimson and hustles the child toward the back. You can almost hear her whispering apologies to the saints as she goes. Everyone pretends not to notice. You hide a smile. Holiness might demand silence, but humanity insists on chaos. After a while, your thoughts drift. You think about your field, about whether the frost will last, about the sheep that keep slipping through the hedge. You catch yourself and scold your own mind. Focus. The priest's talking about sin, now, greed, envy, sloth, the usual suspects. You mentally check them off like items on a shopping list. Envy, maybe a little. Sloth, you'd need a day off to qualify. He starts on lust, and a few people shift uncomfortably. You glance sideways and see your neighbor staring intently at his shoes. Someone coughs to hide a laugh. You think of last Sunday when the same priest warned against pride, then spent half the afternoon boasting about his new vestments. You wonder if that counts as irony. Probably best not to ask. A gust of wind rattles the windows, sending a shiver through the congregation. You glance up at the ceiling and see one of the candles flicker dangerously close to a wooden beam. For a second, you imagine the whole roof going up in flames. Everyone running for the door, the priest still shouting about repentance. You smother a laugh, not the time. The sermon finally wanes, giving way to hymns. The cantor leads the song, his voice clear and strong, and the congregation follows as best it can. Some sing too high, others too low, but the result is oddly moving, like a single creature with 100 imperfect voices. You remember your mother telling you once that angels can't resist joining human voices when they sing in harmony. You like that idea? Even if you sound terrible, maybe an angel is fixing it on the way up. When the final blessing comes, you cross yourself once more. The priest lifts his hands and says something that might mean go in peace. You're not sure, but everyone turns toward the door, so you follow. The first breath of outside air feels like freedom. The incense still clings to your clothes, mixing with the scent of mud and smoke. You stretch your legs, grateful to be standing again. Around you, the villagers pour out, blinking like people waking from a shared dream. Someone laughs, someone sneezes. Someone mutters about the priest's sermon lasting longer than a royal war. The tension of reverence breaks all at once, replaced by the hum of ordinary life rushing back in. You can hear the blacksmith telling a joke, the miller's wife bargaining over a loaf of bread, the sound of a lute somewhere, someone eager to start the merry part of Sunday. As you step down from the church steps, you feel lighter, not because you're holier, but because for an hour you didn't have to worry about the fields or the taxes or the Lord's steward. You just had to kneel, listen, and try not to snore. A faint smile crosses your face as you glance back at the church door, still swinging slowly shut. Whatever else this day holds, gossip, food, maybe a touch of sin, it all begins here. With candles, smoke, and the quiet promise that for one day, your soul might be as clean as your freshly washed hands. Outside, the churchyard hums like a beehive awakened by sunlight. The moment Mass ends, reverence gives way to chatter, trading, and laughter. You step onto the damp grass, careful to avoid the uneven mounds of graves that huddle close to the church walls. Some stones lean like drunks, names half-raised by moss and time. Others are freshly dug, the soil still dark and soft, marked by a crude wooden cross. Life and death coexist here, without ceremony, just part of the same weekly rhythm. The village gathers in clusters, men shaking off stiffness from kneeling too long, women adjusting shawls, children darting between skirts like small, noisy birds. The air fills with the scent of baked bread, wool, and wet earth. You hear laughter, bargaining, the faint creak of cartwheels as a farmer arrives late with a basket of turnips to trade. A boy runs past, waving a wooden sword. "I'm St. George," he shouts. Another child brandishes a stick. Then, "I'm the dragon." Their mock battle draws cheers from the adults. The laughter feels louder after an hour of quiet prayer, the joy almost defiant. Nearby, a group of women gather around a wooden bench, gossiping in low, animated voices. You hear snippets talk of a sick cow, of the Reeves' daughter being seen walking with the miller's apprentice. Each rumor passes like a coin, traded for another. Gossip, after all, is the currency of community. A few paces away, the men are already deep in discussion, half about crops, half about politics they only partly understand. You catch fragments. Rain came too early this year. The Lord Steward says more taxes for the king's campaign. Campaign for what? Who knows? A T just said we owe more. You shake your head. For most peasants, politics is like the weather, distant, uncontrollable, and best endured in silence. The priest steps outside, robes flapping in the breeze. The crowd instinctively parts for him, a ripple of respect or maybe just habit. He blesses a few children, nods to the reeve, and gives a thin smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. You suspect he's already thinking about the roast goose waiting in his rectory. Behind the church, a group of boys chase a dog that's stolen a scrap of bread from the offering table. The animal darts between gravestones, tail wagging wildly. The boys shout, laugh, slip in the mud, and keep running. The priest pretends not to see. God, presumably, understands. You find yourself drifting toward the edge of the yard, where a few villagers are unpacking baskets. A makeshift market forms almost instantly. Eggs, onions, a slab of cheese, some rough-spun cloth. Coins clink softly, though barter is more common. A jar of honey might trade for a pair of mittens, a string of dried fish for a candle stub. The market after Mass isn't just about trading its news, entertainment, and survival wrapped into one. For people who rarely travel more than a few miles from home, this is the weekly heartbeat of connection. You stop to inspect a small bundle of herbs laid out on a cloth. The herbalist, an old woman with a face like carved oak, glances up. "Feverfew," she says, before you can ask. "Good for headaches, or for bad dreams, if you hang it over your door." You nod, pretending you might buy some, though you know you'll just pick your own later. She smiles anyway, sensing the lie but not minding. Everyone bargains with politeness as much as with coin. A commotion draws your eye toward the church steps. A small troop of minstrels has appeared, 3 men and a woman, cloaked in colors brighter than anything the villagers own. One plays a lute, another beats a hand drum, while the woman sings, her voice high and clear as birdsong. They aren't supposed to perform on church grounds, not right after Mass, but the priest has retreated inside. And no one's in the mood to be pious anymore. The villagers gather close, coins clinking into a wooden bowl. The song tells of a knight who went to war, his love waiting faithfully till she didn't. It's tragic, funny, bawdy enough to make the younger men smirk and the older women scold without conviction. When the song ends, the crowd cheers. The minstrel bows low and says, "If you liked that tale, wait till the feast tonight." A murmur of anticipation passes through the crowd. Ah, yes, the Sunday feast. Small, humble, and fleeting. But it's the one bright note in a week of toil. As the market thins and the gossip fades, you make your way home. The path winds past hedges slick with dew, through fields already showing frost. Smoke rises from chimneys ahead, curling into the pale blue sky. The village smells of wood smoke and stew. Inside your cottage, the fire's still burning low from the morning. You feed it a few sticks, then hang your damp cloak by the hearth. The warmth spreads quickly, seeping into your bones. Your wife hums softly as she stirs a pot of pottage peas, onions, and a bit of bacon saved from yesterday. The aroma makes your stomach twist with hunger. You sit by the fire, stretching your legs toward the heat. Outside, you can hear laughter echoing faintly from another house. Somewhere a dog barks, then quiets. For a while, you simply listen to the pop of the fire, the soft scrape of a spoon, the rhythmic creak of the wooden beam overhead. The world feels smaller, safer, contained within these rough walls. Your wife sets a bowl in front of you and says, "Not much, but warm." You smile. That's enough. As you eat, she tells you about the gossip you missed, the baker's apprentice planning to wed the Reeves' cousin. The widow next door selling her geese to pay her rent. The rumor that the Lord's son might return from his travels. News travels fast in small villages, even when half of it isn't true. After the meal, you step outside again. The sun is low now, turning the frost on the fields to glitter. A few villagers gather near the green, setting up for the evening's feast. Someone's brought a barrel of ale, someone else a wheel of cheese. The butcher's wife carries a pie big enough to feed 10. The feast isn't grand by any noble, standard, just rough tables. It's wooden cups, laughter, and the faint promise of warmth in the cold air. But for a peasant, it's enough to feel alive for a night. The Reeve, slightly drunk already, claps along off-beat. The blacksmith's apprentice twirls the miller's daughter until they both collapse, laughing. You take a sip of ale, its warmth spreading through your chest. The night smells of smoke, sweat, and roast meat. Someone tosses another log onto the fire, sparks leaping into the darkness. Historians might call this communal recreation, but that phrase misses the soul of it. For these few hours, the villagers aren't laborers, tenants, or serfs. They're simply human beings, united by hunger, laughter, and survival. An old man leans close to you, voice rough with age. "You know," he says, "the priest says heaven's full of angels singing. But I think it sounds more like this." He gestures toward the laughter, the music, the clinking of cups. You nod. Maybe so. The fire crackles louder. Stars emerge above, sharp and cold. The church bell tolls, once distant but clear, a gentle reminder of where the day began. And as the night deepens, you think that maybe, in this moment of warmth and noise and fleeting joy, heaven feels closer than you've ever known. The morning's chill has faded, and now the scent of roasting meat curls through the air like a blessing. You follow it instinctively, your stomach already growling. Sundays may belong to God, but the afternoon belongs to the stomach. Inside your cottage, the fire burns brighter than usual. Your wife's face glows in its light as she ladles pottage from the pot, thick with barley, beans, and wild greens. On the hearth, a small iron pan sizzles with something rare enough to draw jealous eyes if anyone knew: a sliver of salted pork, saved since Easter and now crisping at the edges. You settle on the bench, hands cupped around your bowl. "A feast fit for a king," you say, half joking. She snorts. "Then let's hope the king likes peas." Still, the smell alone could make a monk break his fast. Most Sundays, meals are humble. Bread made from rye or barley, so coarse it could scratch the inside of your mouth. Pottage thick enough to stand a spoon in. Maybe cheese, if the cow's been kind that week. But today, there's meat even, if it's barely more than a mouthful. You chew slowly, savoring each bite as if it were treasure. Across the table, your youngest picks at her bowl. "Is there more pork?" she asks, hopeful. You shake your head. "Not till next feast day." She sighs dramatically, then grins and dunks her bread in the broth. This, you think, is the rhythm of peasant life: gratitude for the small, suspicion of the large, and the constant whisper of hunger somewhere just beneath the laughter. Outside, the feast continues in the open. You can hear the faint hum of voices, bursts of laughter, the occasional cheer. You finish eating, wipe your hands, and step into the sunlight again. The village green has transformed into a makeshift banquet hall. Long tables, really just planks, set on barrels grown under the weight of what everyone's managed to bring. Barley loaves, onion pies, soft cheese, apples roasted till they split and leaked syrup onto their skins. The smell is rich and alive, almost dizzying. You spot the reeve carving a goose, puffed with pride because he's the only one in the village who could afford such luxury. He offers slices to the priest and the Lord's steward, both seated at the far end like honored guests. The rest of you wait your turn, plates outstretched with polite patience that barely hides the eagerness underneath. A girl passes, carrying a jug of ale. She stops when she sees you and grins. You look thirsty. You take the cup she offers, the liquid, frothy, and warm. It tastes faintly sour, but fills you with comfort nonetheless. You nod in thanks. Then, just as the meal begins to quiet into that heavy, satisfied murmur of full bellies, someone says it. "Do you remember last year's feast, when old Walter spiced the stew with pepper?" The crowd erupts in laughter. Pepper, real pepper, imported from somewhere across the world, so precious it costs more than a month's rent. Walter had borrowed a pinch from the manor kitchen, claiming he just wanted to smell it. Instead, he dumped the whole thing into the pot. Half the village couldn't stop sneezing for days. The memory makes you laugh until your stomach hurts. Even the priest chuckles, though he shakes his head as if to say, peasants will never learn moderation. A fact drifts through your mind, one your grandfather once told you. In some towns, spices were locked in chests with iron keys, guarded like treasure. Not gold, not jewels, just ground seeds and dried roots. And here you are, happy to taste a hint of garlic and a crumb of salt. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were really so poor in diet, or whether the records exaggerate for pity. But when you stare down at your barley bread and cheese rind, you suspect the truth doesn't need much debate. Still, food is celebration. It's community. You see it in the way everyone shares, even the little they have. A boy passes a crust of bread to an old woman. She tears it in half and gives it back to him. No one eats alone, not today. When the last bowl is scraped clean, the fiddler tunes his instrument again, and the laughter swells anew. A couple of young men begin juggling apples, one of which explodes mid-air when it hits a rock, showering sticky pulp over the crowd. Waste of good fruit. Someone shouts, but the jeers melt into laughter anyway. You lean back, content. For once, you feel almost rich, not in coin, but in the slow warmth of community, the shared rhythm of breath and chatter. But not every Sunday feast is so easy. Some weeks, famine hovers close. You've seen winters where bread was stretched with ground acorns, where thin soups replaced solid meals. On those Sundays, the feast becomes an act of stubborn fatha way of saying, "We're still here." The priest rises after the meal, holding his cup aloft. "Give thanks," he calls, "for the Lord provides." The villagers echo him, half prayer, half toast. You murmur along, wondering quietly if the Lord might consider providing just a little more next week. The ale loosens tongues. Someone starts a bawdy song about a miller's wife and her missing grain. The priest pretends not to hear. The reeve coughs pointedly. But the laughter only grows. A woman nearby offers you a small bite of something sweet, a honey cake, browned and sticky. "Made from my own hive," she says proudly. You take a cautious bite. The flavor floods your mouth, so rare and rich that for a moment you close your eyes just to hold it longer. Careful, she teases. Too much honey makes you dream of sin. You grin. Then I'll take my chances. As the sun begins to tilt westward, the tables empty slowly. Plates and cups are collected, scraps fed to pigs or dogs. Children chase one another with leftover apple cores, shrieking with glee. The older folk lean on their canes, watching, smiling faintly. The feast ends not with ceremony, but with a slow, satisfied exhale. A man begins to strum the lute again, this time softly, almost wistfully. His song drifts over the green like smoke, thin and fragile. It tells of a harvest long past and a love never returned. You feel your eyelids grow heavy. Maybe it's the ale. Maybe the warmth of the crowd. The fire flickers, painting everyone in gold. For a moment, you let yourself imagine something impossible, that this day could stretch on forever. No lord's demands, no aching back, no endless fields. Just laughter and food and the soft comfort of belonging. But even as you think it, the shadows lengthen and the air cools. Tomorrow will come, bringing work and blisters and duty. For now, though, you push the thought away. You take another sip of ale, sigh, and think, if heaven tastes like this, a bit of pork, a mouthful of honey, and the sound of laughter, then maybe you've already had your share. The feast's last embers fade into laughter and song. The smell of ale and smoke lingers like perfume in the evening air. Someone, probably the miller's boy, starts to whistle, and before long, the entire village is humming the same tune. The priest has gone back to his rectory, and with his watchful eye gone, the rules loosen like a too-tight belt after dinner. This is when the fun really begins. You drift toward the village green, where a few men are rolling out a leather ball more lump than sphere, patched from old boots and sheep hide. Come on then, one of them calls. Let's have a proper match. You hesitate for a heartbeat, but your friends are already running. Before you know it, you're in the middle of the chaos, mud squelching under your feet, shouts and laughter filling the air. Medieval football isn't like the polite game of modern times. There are no lines, no goals, no mercy. Just two sides and one simple rule: get the ball somewhere. You dodge, push, trip, and yell until your lungs burn. Someone grabs your tunic, you shove them back. A cheer erupts as the ball shoots toward the ditch. It's messy, violent, and utterly glorious. A few women cheer from the sidelines, rolling their eyes at the grown men covered in muck. Idiots, the lot of them, one says, laughing. But she's grinning, too. Even she can't help it. Joy is contagious. Historians still argue whether Sunday sports were officially banned by the church or just frowned upon. Either way, no one here seems to care. The priest's sermons about keeping the Sabbath holy are long forgotten. For now, the only holiness is in laughter. When the game finally ends, mostly because the ball has vanished under a hedge, you collapse on the grass, panting. Your hands sting, your knees are filthy, and your heart feels light. The world is briefly perfect in its imperfection. Nearby, another group has started a different kind of competition: archery practice. It's part sport, part duty. Every able-bodied man is supposed to practice with the longbow by order of the crown. The targets are rough bundles of straw with charcoal circles drawn on them, but the archers treat the task with half-serious pride. You wander closer, watching the arrows thud into the straw. One of the older men, proud of his skill, boasts, "If the French come again, I'll shoot 'em before they reach the hedges." Someone laughs. "If they come, you'll still be in the alehouse." The laughter rolls, and the old man just grins, pulling another arrow from his quiver. You take a turn, too. The bow feels heavy, rough against your palm. You draw, aim, and release. The arrow flies wide, missing everything but your pride. The others cheer mockingly, but you bow dramatically, just warning the enemy. You say, and the laughter renews. When the sun dips low, the games shift again. The younger folk gather near the bonfire, forming a ring of eager faces. A fiddler tunes up, the strings' shrill cry cutting through the chatter. Then comes the first dance around, simple step that everyone knows, even those who pretend they don't. You find yourself pulled into the circle, hands linked with neighbors and strangers alike. The rhythm quickens. Feet stamp, skirts swish, and the earth itself seems to pulse beneath you. It's the same pattern your parents danced, and there's before them a circle of survival disguised as joy. Then comes the singing. Ballads and love songs, bawdy verses and solemn hymns twisted into drinking tunes. Someone sings of Robin Hood. Someone else adds verses too ridiculous to be true. The fiddler can't stop laughing long enough to play. You remember what your father used to say? Sing loud, because life's short and tomorrow's heavy. You take that advice to heart tonight. Between dances, couples slip into the shadows. Flirtation is practically a sport in itself, glances across the firelight. Hands brushing by accident, whispered jokes, too quiet for the priest to hear if he were still here. You catch the miller's daughter and the blacksmith's apprentice, laughing a little too close. Tomorrow, they'll both deny anything happened. Tonight, the stars say otherwise. Not all games are innocent. A few lads begin a contest of strength, arm wrestling on the edge of a cart. The crowd shouts, wagers fly mostly in bread, ale, or promises of chores. You join in the cheering, your voice hoarse from laughing. Go on, Thomas. Show him who's lord of the muck heap. Someone yells. Thomas wins, of course, then immediately trips and spills half a mug of ale down his tunic. Victory never lasts long. In one corner, the old storyteller begins to gather an audience. His beard catches the firelight. His eyes gleam like a fox's. He speaks in that sing-song rhythm that pulls you in before you know it. Tonight, his tale is about a saint who fought a demon disguised as a goose. A goose. Someone laughs. Why not a dragon? The old man shrugs. Because a goose steals bread more often than dragons do. The children are entranced, clutching their knees, faces glowing in the light. You remember sitting just like that, once wide-eyed, half believing that saints really walked among you, sword in one hand, loaf in the other. Then, amid the laughter and clapping, someone begins a mischievous chant. Dance of the devils. I dance of the devils. It's a village joke-an old pagan echo that somehow survived centuries of priests and sermons. The men stomp their feet, mimicking horned beasts. The women wave scarves like wings. It's half mockery, half memory. No one really believes in devils. But no one dares stop the dance either. A shiver passes through you, the kind that comes when old traditions stir beneath the surface of new faith. Historians still debate whether such pagan remnants truly persisted, or if modern minds just like to imagine them. But as the villagers leap and howl under the flickering fire, you think some echoes never die. The night deepens. The ale runs low, the songs grow slower. People drift toward the edges of the firelight, heads on each other's shoulders. You hear soft laughter, then silence, then the crackle of the fire filling the gaps. You sit on the grass, legs stretched out, and look up. The stars are bright tonight, cold and unblinking. Somewhere beyond them, the priest says, lies heaven. But right now, with the laughter fading, the warmth still on your skin, and the smell of smoke clinging to your hair, heaven feels a lot closer than the clouds. A last song rises slow, wistful, it's a love ballad, half forgotten, passed down from voice to voice until no one remembers who wrote it. You hum along, your voice low and rough, joining the others. When the final note fades, no one speaks. The fire sighs. The village holds its breath. And then, quietly, the night exhales against soft laughter, shuffling feet, the slow retreat of joy back into the darkness. You know tomorrow you'll ache from all this foolishness, but right now, you don't care. Because tonight, for once, you are not just a peasant. You're a living thing in motion, part of something warm, wild, and wonderfully human. Morning creeps in reluctantly, dragging a pale mist across the fields. The echo of last night's laughter still hangs in the air, but it fades quickly beneath the rhythm of church bells and the scrape of wooden doors. Your head feels heavy from too little sleep and too much ale, but Sunday isn't over yet, not by a long shot. You rub your eyes, throw on your cloak, and step outside. The village green looks different in daylight mud trampled. Ashes cooling in small gray mounds. A few stray cups forgotten near the fire. The evidence of joy always looks a bit sad the next morning, doesn't it? But there's no time for sentiment. Today isn't all rest and merriment. Some Sundays belong not to God, but to the Lord. You see them gathering already. The reeve, the bailiff. A handful of peasants standing stiffly as the steward from the manor approaches. His cloak is too fine for the season, lined with fur that could feed half the village if boiled. He looks around as though the air itself offends him. Court day, you mutter. Not the royal kind, no crowns. No velvet, but the manorial court where every broken fence, missing chicken, and disputed cow must be judged. It's a strange kind of theater, half justice, half intimidation. You join the crowd, shivering a little as the steward sits on a wooden stool, unrolling a parchment so long it could double as a blanket. The reeve calls out names, one after another. The villagers shift nervously, hats in hand. First case, a boundary dispute between the baker and the shepherd. The steward listens, bored, then declares the shepherd guilty of trespassing. Fine, 1 penny. The shepherd protests, but the sheep can't read fences. The steward doesn't laugh. Then teach them. The crowd snickers quietly, careful not to let him hear. Next comes a widow accused of taking firewood from the Lord's forest. Only the fallen branches, she insists. The steward raises an eyebrow. All branches fall eventually. He finds her a halfpenny anyway. You feel anger stir in your chest, but you know better than to speak. Justice here isn't blind, it just has expensive taste. Historians still argue whether the manorial courts were fair institutions or tools of oppression. The truth, you suspect, depends entirely on which side of the parchment you stood. You're called next not for a crime, but for duty. The steward reminds everyone of next week's corvée labor, a day of free work on the Lord's fields. Every man with 2 hands and a back, he says, glancing at you pointedly, is expected to serve. You nod, trying not to grimace. So much for rest. The proceedings drag on, names blending into murmurs, accusations turning into fines, fines turning into silence. You notice a boy nodding off near the back. His mother nudges him sharply, whispering, "You'll get us in trouble." He blinks awake, eyes wide with fear. At last, the steward stands, stretches, and announces, "The Lord thanks you for your loyalty." You can tell he means it about as much as the wind thanks the trees for bending. When the crowd disperses, you find yourself walking alongside the reeve. He shrugs. Could have been worse. At least no one got flogged. You nod. That's a low bar, friend. Back in the green, life resumes its rhythm. Women gather to wash pots in the stream, chatting about the unfair fines and laughing to soften their bitterness. Children chase each other again, unbothered by matters of law. The fiddler from last night tunes his instrument quietly, humming a tune too soft to carry. But there's another duty today, a less formal one, yet just as serious. The village meeting. It takes place near the church, under a great oak tree that's older than any man alive. The villagers circle beneath its branches, faces flushed from cold and argument. The reeve stands on a rock, arms crossed, trying to sound authoritative. The bridge by the mill needs mending, he says. Who'll give wood? No one answers. Wood means warmth, and warmth means life. After a long silence, the smith coughs. "I'll bring 2 planks, he says grudgingly. The reeve nods. And the rest of you? Labor. 3 days' work before the frost deepens. Groans ripple through the crowd, but no one refuses. You raise your hand, too. What else can you do? Refuse and risk the steward's wrath. You glance at the oak tree's thick branches, the way its roots twist through the earth like old bones. Beneath it, generation after generation has argued, promised, cursed, and yielded. It feels like the village is true, altar less holy, but more honest. A fringe belief lingers in your mind, one your grandmother whispered once, that the oak remembers. That if you speak your grievances under its shade, it carries them to the saints or the old gods, depending on who's listening. You almost smile. Maybe it's true. Maybe that's why the meetings always end with someone muttering to the wind. When the crowd disperses again, the sun is already slanting low, turning the frost to silver dust. You walk toward the edge of the fields where a few men are repairing a broken fence. Though it's technically Sunday, work never really stops. It just changes its excuse. You join them for a while, hammering stakes, pulling wire. The air smells of iron and pine. One man jokes, "This is what God meant by rest, eh?" Another laughs bitterly. If he wanted us to rest, he shouldn't VA made fences. A hawk circles overhead, crying sharply. You pause, watching it glide above the fields. The sight makes you think of freedom, not the kind nobles write poems about, but the simple freedom of moving without permission. You envy that bird more than you care to admit. When the fence is fixed, you sit for a moment on the boundary post, stretching your back. The others wander off toward home, but you linger, staring at the manor on the hill. Its stone walls catch the sunset, glowing red like fire. Inside, you imagine the steward is eating roasted duck and fresh bread. Your dinner, you know, will be thinner. Still, a strange calm settles over you. The day may be ruled by lords and priests, but the night belongs to no one. You stand, brush dirt from your hands, and make your way back through the fields. The cold bites at your cheeks. Your breath drifts like smoke. From somewhere distant, the church bell rings again, a soft reminder that the Sabbath is nearly done. You murmur a half prayer, not sure who it's for, God, the oak, or maybe yourself. Then, with the faintest grin, you add, "And if you're listening, Lord." Maybe skip the steward next week. The wind answers with nothing but silence, but somehow it feels like understanding. The last bell fades, and with it, the weight of Sunday finally begins to lift. You feel it in your shoulders, the slow uncoiling of tension, the quiet return of ordinary life. Tomorrow, the grind will start again. Dawn plowing, feeding pigs, dodging mud, and orders. But for a few more hours, the village drifts in that strange limbo between duty and rest. You wander toward the cottages, where thin trails of smoke curl from thatched roofs. The air smells of turnips, stew, and wood ash. Dogs bark lazily, too tired to care. Somewhere nearby, someone's still laughing, low and tired, the kind of laugh that comes from simple survival. You pass the baker's house, where the oven's faint glow paints the wall orange. Then the weaver's yard, where threads flutter on a drying line like tiny flags. You duck inside your own cottage, the warmth hitting your face like an embrace. The hearth is alive again, though the logs are small. Your wife, for maybe your sister or your mother, depending on how your story fits, turns a pot with a wooden ladle, stirring something thick and brown. "Not much left," she says, "but it'll fill us." You sit, stretching your legs near the fire, feeling the stiffness of the day melt just enough. You notice the faint glow on her face, the steady rhythm of her hand as she stirs. It's moments like this that hold the real meaning of rest, not sleep. Not idleness, but the quiet company of those who know your every sigh. She hands you a bowl. It's thin, yes, but hot. You blow on it and take a sip. Barley, onion, a hint of salted pork, if you're lucky. You close your eyes, pretending it's a feast. "Tastes better than the Lord's duck," you mutter. She smirks. Keep saying that. Maybe you'll believe it. You grin, half because it's true, half because that's all you can do. After dinner, the cottage fills with soft motion. A child curls up on the floor near the fire, clutching a rag doll. Someone hums an old lullaby that probably predates the church bells. The melody bends and drifts, weaving through the smoke like a ghost that refuses to leave. Outside, the wind picks up. You hear shutters creak, the distant creak of the mill wheel, the low murmur of a cow shifting in the byre. The entire village exhales in unison, as though the earth itself were taking a deep breath. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly found rest on Sundays, or if the idea of a day of peace was mostly wishful thinking. Some records show laws forbidding work, yet countless accounts describe fields still plowed, repairs still made, bread still baked. Maybe rest, you think, isn't a matter of loots, an act of quiet rebellion. You glance toward the shelf near the hearth where a tiny wooden cross leans. Next to it sits something older as smooth stone, carved with spirals, a remnant of some forgotten superstition. It's been there for years, and though the priest would scold you for it, no one dares throw it away. You run your thumb over it absently. Maybe both symbols belong here, side by side. After all, faith doesn't live in books. It lives in habit. Later, when the fire dies low, you step outside for air. The night sky stretches vast and sharp above you, 1,000 tiny flames piercing the dark. You tilt your head back, tracing the constellations. The priest never mentions the plow, the hunter, the dragon. Your breath makes soft clouds that vanish almost instantly. You remember what Father Anselm said once during a sermon? Every star is an angel's eye. You're not sure you buy that, but it's a nice thought. Still, you prefer the old tales, the ones where the stars are the souls of the departed, keeping watch. Maybe one of them is yours someday, flickering faintly, stubbornly refusing to go out. From a few cottages away, you hear the sound of a fiddle, gentle this time, played for no one but the firelight. It drifts through the air, haunting and tender, wrapping around you like smoke. You close your eyes. You can almost see them. Dancers on the green, laughter echoing, torches swinging. The village sleeps, but its memory doesn't. You think of the people who filled this place long before youth, ones who walked the same muddy paths, whispered the same half-prayers, endured the same winters. Their ghosts aren't scary. They're comforting, like familiar footsteps in another room. A cat slinks by, brushing against your leg. You scratch its head absently, and it purrs, unimpressed by human concerns. The church bell rings once more, a single note marking Compline, the final prayer of the day. You murmur the words quietly, not perfectly, but enough. Grant us rest, O Lord, and a peaceful night. You turn back inside, the fire's down to embers now, a faint orange heartbeat. You lie down beside it, wrapping your cloak tight. Your mind drifts not toward heaven or fields, but toward something simpler. The smell of bread, the laughter of neighbors, the rhythm of a world that, for all its hardship, still finds room for peace. And somewhere between waking and sleep, you imagine tomorrow. The sound of roosters, the slap of wet boots, the faint ache in your hands as you lift the plow again. Life continuing because it must. But tonight, you rest. Truly rest. The last thought before sleep sneaks up on you like a whisper. Maybe that's the real miracle of Sunday, not that it was given to you, but that you managed to keep a piece of it for yourself. Outside, the wind hums through the thatch like a lullaby. The stars blink once, twice, as though nodding goodnight. And for the first time in a long while, the village is still. The sunlight is already slanting low when you rise, brushing gold across the muddy paths and the frost-spotted fields. Sunday is deep into its second act, that strange stretch of hours that feel both endless and fleeting. You stretch your back, letting the stiffness unwind slowly, every ache a quiet reminder of yesterday, the games, the feasts, the toil, the laughter that left your cheeks sore. Life as a peasant is a string of small battles, bending, lifting, digging, laughing, surviving. And yet somehow, after all that, you feel strangely whole. The village hums quietly, like the low purr of a great beast content to watch its children play. Smoke curls in lazy spirals from thatched roofs, carrying hints of turnip stew. Bread baking in small ovens, and the faint, persistent tang of manure. Dogs bark lazily at stray chickens, more in boredom than vigilance. Somewhere, a child squeals, chasing a goat that's discovered a forgotten apple, and the sound ricochets off the walls of cottages and barns. You smile. Chaos has a rhythm, and it's comforting. Even on Sunday, duties quietly insist. You pass neighbors tending animals or repairing fences. You join in, hefting a post and digging it into the softened earth. There's something meditative in the repetition, the thump of wood against soil, the scrape of iron on stone, the steady breathing of companions. It's not rest, exactly, but it is a kind of belonging. And today, belonging feels like enough. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly rested on Sundays, or if the so-called day of rest was mostly ceremonial. Some records show laws forbidding work, yet daily life demanded otherwise. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. Survival requires action, yes, but even labor can be comforting if it's shared. It's done in rhythm with neighbors, with the fields, with the seasons themselves. A hawk circles overhead, talons tucked, silent and perfect. You pause to watch it glide against the fading sun. Freedom, it seems, belongs to the skies, but the village has its own kind of freedom too. The freedom of a shared existence, of small victories, of laughter echoing across the green. You remember the last feast, Walter and his pepper disaster, the children chasing apples, the laughter under the oak tree. That joy, that foolish, fleeting, communal joy, still hums in the corners of your mind. By mid-afternoon, neighbors begin gathering near the well, exchanging scraps and news, gossip, and small kindnesses. The man who lost a bet yesterday grudgingly hands over a loaf of bread, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Children dart through legs, shrieking, their energy endless. The blacksmith cracks a rare smile as he unloads firewood, and for a moment, even the world itself seems to pause in appreciation of human persistence. The air is soft now, carrying the faint smell of damp earth, embers from the hearths, and distant baking bread. You walk along the path toward your own cottage, noticing the way the village exhales after the day's tiny triumphs and rituals. Fires are tended for the final time. Chickens trudge reluctantly toward coops, and the smell of bread cooling on windowsills mingles with the scent of smoke and mud. Even the wind seems to slow its pace, sighing gently through the hedgerows and bare branches. Inside your cottage, the hearth glows with the last embers, painting the walls in flickering gold. You sit near it, stretching your legs, letting warmth seep into your bones. The day has carried you from prayer to feast, from laughter to sport, from labor to quiet reflection. Each moment stitches together like a patchwork quilt ruff, uneven, imperfect, but uniquely yours. You glance at the small wooden cross by the hearth, then at the carved stone your grandmother said was protective, whispering of spirits that linger just beyond the edge of sight. Somehow, both belong here. Faith, superstition, habit, they blend seamlessly, invisible threads holding life together. You run your thumb over the stone, remembering her voice. Even the wind listens if you speak softly. Perhaps it's true. Perhaps it isn't. It doesn't matter. It feels like home. Outside, the first stars prick the night sky, cool and distant. The wind rustles softly through the trees, a lullaby older than anyone alive. Somewhere distant, the fiddler from the green plays a soft, meandering tune, the notes twisting lazily through the air. Children pause mid-laughter to listen, heads tilted. And you notice even the cows standing quietly, as though the music tethers them for a moment. The village holds its breath in gentle harmony. You step outside briefly, boots squelching in damp grass, taking in the vast stillness. The manor sits dark on the hill, its stone walls reflecting nothing but the last glint of sunlight. The steward is long gone, the lord perhaps asleep, counting coins in a firelit chamber. Here in the village, however, life continues, stubborn and quiet, alive in the echo of the day. You wander to the fields, inspecting fences and animals one last time. The hedges are trimmed, the posts are firm, the animals calm. Every step, every motion, feels grounded. The rhythm of work, the pulse of survival, the echo of laughter, and feasting it all threads together. The sun tilts toward the horizon, slanting long shadows across furrows and mud. Somewhere, a child laughs, a dog barks, and it all blends into a single breathing thing: the village alive. Historians still debate whether peasants found true rest on Sundays or if the concept was mostly a noble fantasy imposed from above. Perhaps it doesn't matter. Rest is subjective. Even small chores, performed quietly, can soothe the mind. The rhythm of life, the familiarity of labor, the laughter shared under the sun, these are a kind of Sabbath, subtle but real. Back at your cottage, the hearth glows lower now. You sit near it, closing your eyes, feeling the warmth seep into your skin. A faint draft from the window brushes your cheek. Somewhere outside, an owl calls softly, a single note that stretches across fields and roofs. Somewhere else, a dog snores, a child shifts in sleep. A cat brushes against a table leg, demanding attention. Life hums in these small motions, unassuming but profound. You think of yesterday's feasts, the laughter, the games, the pepper disaster, the dancing under the oak, the old storyteller's goose tale. All of it, the chaos, the joy, the feigned scolding by the priest, blends with this moment into a quiet mosaic. You imagine the villagers who lived before you, treading the same paths, whispering the same half-prayers, enduring the same work. Their spirits feel less like ghosts and more like companions, reminders that life persists in stubborn beauty. The fire crackles once, twice. You breathe deeply, letting the day settle in your chest. Tomorrow will bring chores, taxes, toil, maybe frustration. But tonight, Sunday, belongs to memory, to warmth, to the quiet grace of being alive. You wrap your cloak around yourself, lying down near the dying embers. The rhythm of the day, the pulse of laughter, the faint hum of the wind, it all blends into a gentle, persistent lullaby. The stars shine brighter now, mirrored faintly in your tired eyes. Somewhere, someone hums a forgotten tune, soft as smoke. Somewhere else, the wind carries the faintest scent of bread and honey, of fields turned and animals fed. You let your mind drift, floating over yesterday and today, the feasts and games, the disputes and chores. The echoes of laughter, the quiet hum of the village breathing together. In the deepest part of your chest, a warmth blooms. Perhaps it is peace. Perhaps it is contentment. Or perhaps it is simply the stubborn joy of having lived another day fully, utterly human. You close your eyes, and the world narrows to the hearth, the wind, the stars, the tiny comforts of body and mind. And as sleep begins to claim you, a thought drifts softly, mischievous and gentle. Tomorrow brings toil, but tonight is ours.